Ever heard of an empire so powerful, so artistically advanced, that it was literally erased from the map? Not in some ancient, mythical past, but just over a century ago. Today, we're uncovering the story of a kingdom that rivaled its European contemporaries in wealth and sophistication. A kingdom that was intentionally wiped from history. This is the story of the lost kingdom of Benin. Picture this. It's the 15th century. While Europe is just emerging from the Middle Ages, deep in the rainforests of what is now modern-day Nigeria, a magnificent city is thriving. This is Benin City, the heart of the Edo Kingdom. Its streets were laid out in a perfect grid, a marvel of urban planning. It was protected by a massive system of walls and moats, a defensive structure 4 times longer than the Great Wall of China. Early European visitors were stunned. One Portuguese captain described it as a city of great size, with houses built in neat rows, a place where the king's court was larger than a whole European town. This wasn't some primitive outpost. This was a global power. The Kingdom of Benin was ruled by a succession of powerful kings known as the Oba. The Oba was not just a political leader. He was the spiritual heart of the nation, considered a divine figure. Under his rule, the kingdom became a major trading hub. They traded ivory, palm oil, and pepper with Portuguese, Dutch, and English merchants. But their most famous export, the one that tells us so much about them today, was their art. The artisans of Benin were masters of their craft, especially in metalworking. Using a complex technique called the lost wax casting method, they created thousands of intricate sculptures from brass and bronze. These weren't just decorations. They were historical documents. They were a library made of metal. These famous Benin bronzes depicted everything. Heroic obas in their ceremonial regalia, noble queen mothers, Portuguese soldiers with their distinct hats and muskets, and even animals that held spiritual significance, like leopards and crocodiles. Each plaque, each head, each sculpture told a story, preserving the kingdom's history, its rituals, and its beliefs for future generations. For a society that relied on oral tradition, this art was their written word. It was their memory. For centuries, Benin maintained a careful balance of power, trading with Europeans but fiercely protecting its sovereignty. They controlled the terms of trade and kept foreign influence at arm's length. This was a kingdom that knew its own strength and value. But as the 19th century drew to a close, the scramble for Africa was in full swing. European powers were carving up the continent, hungry for resources and territory. The British had their eyes on the wealth of Benin, particularly its palm oil and rubber, which were crucial for their industrial revolution. The relationship, once based on trade, soured. The British wanted more control, but the Oba at the time, Oba Oven Ramwin, resisted. He saw the growing threat of colonialism and tried to protect his kingdom's independence. The tension built and built until it exploded in 1897. A British delegation, despite being warned not to come during a sacred festival, attempted to enter Benin City. What happened next is still debated, but the result was that most of the British party was killed. The British Empire seized this incident as a pretext to do what they had wanted to do all along: conquer the kingdom. They launched a massive military operation called the Punitive Expedition. It was a brutal, overwhelming assault. Armed with modern Maxim guns, a British force of over 1,000 soldiers marched on Benin City. The Edo warriors, fighting with whatever they had, stood little chance. After 10 days of intense fighting, the city fell. What followed was not just a military victory. It was an act of cultural annihilation. The British soldiers looted the city. They systematically stripped the royal palace, the spiritual and political center of the kingdom, of its treasures. They took everything. Thousands of priceless artifacts, the Benin bronzes, the ivory carvings, the historical records of an entire civilization, were packed up and shipped back to London. Then, they set the city ablaze. The great capital of Benin, a center of culture and power for centuries, burned to the ground. Oba Oven Ramwin was captured and exiled, and the Kingdom of Benin, as an independent state, ceased to exist. It was absorbed into the British colony of Nigeria. In the eyes of the world, and in the history books written by the victors, the great kingdom vanished. So what happened to all that treasure? The stolen art, numbering in the thousands of pieces, was sold off in London to cover the costs of the expedition. Museums and private collectors across Europe and America scrambled to buy them. The Benin bronzes, once the proud historical records of a kingdom, became exotic curiosities in Western display cases. They were admired for their beauty and technical skill, but their context, their meaning, their soul was stripped away. They were no longer the library of the Edo people. They were artifacts of a lost civilization. For decades, the story of Benin was told from the perspective of its conquerors. It was framed as a necessary action to end a savage kingdom. The art was presented as proof that maybe, just maybe, this African kingdom had been influenced by Europeans, because how else could they create such masterpieces? The true history of Benin, its complex society, its advanced urban planning, its sovereign power, was ignored, buried under layers of colonial propaganda. But memory is a powerful thing. While the kingdom was gone, the Edo people remained. The descendants of the Obus continued their line, and the stories of their former glory were passed down through generations. And they never forgot about their stolen heritage. For over a century, Nigeria has been campaigning for the return of the Benin bronzes. They argue, quite simply, that these artifacts belong in Benin, where their stories can be told correctly and where they can serve as a link to a proud past for a new generation. In recent years, the world has finally started to listen. The conversation around colonialism and cultural heritage has shifted dramatically. Museums are now grappling with their own histories and the uncomfortable truth of how many of their collections were acquired. It's a slow process, but it's happening. Germany has committed to returning over 1,000 of its bronzes. A museum in the UK returned a key and a cockerel sculpture. The Smithsonian in the United States returned its collection. These are small steps, but they are hugely significant. Back in Benin City, a new museum is being built, the Edo Museum of West African Art. It's a state-of-the-art facility designed to house the returning artifacts and to become a new center for research and education. It's a symbol of hope, a sign that the story of Benin is not over. The return of the bronzes is not just about correcting a historical wrong. It's about cultural revival. It's about reconnecting a people with their identity. It's about finally allowing the Library of Benin to be read by its own people in its own land. The story of the Kingdom of Benin is a stark reminder of how easily history can be rewritten by those with power. But it's also a powerful story of resilience, of a culture that refused to be erased. The empire may have vanished from the maps of the 19th century, but its spirit, its art, and its memory are slowly but surely coming home. The lost kingdom is being found again. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, hit that like button and subscribe for more hidden histories. Let me know in the comments what you think about the return of these artifacts. See you next time.